Late former DA Federal Council Chairperson James Selfe is being remembered as a person who wasn't scared of being unpopular. The 68-year-old died yesterday after a long illness. Former DA member Mbali Ntuli joins us to discuss Selfe's legacy. Mbali, good evening. Thank you very much for your time. Can you recall, your very first, or at least one of your first encounters with James Selfe?
Thank you for having me. I think I met James Selfe when I was 19. I was still in university, and he was part of actually spearheading what would become the DA Young Leaders program. And this was part of a vision to make sure that they were able to have young leaders from across the country that could form part of the party and really have a succession plan that was being put in place for the DA, and to just get the greatest talents that they could find of people that were deeply passionate about the country. And I think that that's one of his most enduring legacies, is that he was able to create that particular program, and it's spawned since then multiple MPs, MPLs, councillors across the country, and continues to be, I think, one of the party's most successful initiatives.
You wrote a few lines on your Facebook timeline today paying tribute to James Selfe. You say very little, but also a lot. Words that caught my attention were, quote, you were never scared to be unpopular. Didn't make you everyone's favorite, close quotes.
Yes, and I think in the role that James had, he couldn't be the kind of person who wanted to be popular with everyone. I think one of the things that most people respected James for was that he was always very firm, but very fair. And that meant that he didn't always involve himself in the petty squabbles of different factions. And so most people could feel aggrieved by that. But I think testament to the ability of him to do his job in that way was that the DA, for a very long time under his stewardship as the chairperson of FedEx and Federal Council, was a formidable party, and I think a good runner for being an alternative for a very long time. And I think a lot of that has to do with the way James conducted his affairs and the way that he behaved towards everyone. And I mean, this is a man who wasn't just a party man in terms of running the operations behind the party. He was assistant to Helen Suzman. From 1994 until his retirement, he sat on the Correctional Facilities Committee and did incredible work there. He's also the reason that many people now know the DA as a party that is always willing to take important cases to court. And that's because he believed very deeply in the Constitution and the ability for a political party to also make sure that it was playing its role in protecting it. And sometimes that meant going to court. And many of the court cases that we've seen change the country, from spy tapes to the appointments of individuals on the NPA, and countless others, have been in testament to James's lawfare, his strategy, his ability to not just write pamphlets. He wrote the constitution of the party. He's done many of the policies of the party. So this was someone who was well respected for being able to do every single part of being a good parliamentarian, leader, legislator, and constitutionalist. So that doesn't always make you popular. And I think that it was good that he could always make sure that he stood firmly on principle rather than trying to get into factional fights.
But I mean, he did all of that, all of what you're saying he did, and yet he was blue to, the core. And I'm asking this because for many people, the notion of someone who's committed to their party is being able to do what your party asks you to do and ask no questions, or do whatever the powerful bloc or blocks in the party ask you to do.
Well, he was exactly, I think, the opposite. And that's why I think you see a vast array of different people, both people who are still in the party and people who are outside of the party, paying tribute to him, because I think he was able to also be a really good guiding and north light for the DA in many instances. And that one would assume that being true blue would mean that you would do whatever the party was. But I think he had enough courage and authenticity to also say when the party was erring, and to try and course correct, or get those who he thought needed to course correct to do so in a way that was gracious and in a way that didn't sink the party.
You also say, quote unquote, the DA under chairmanship was at its strongest. That's a very or rather loaded statement?
I don't think so. I think it's absolutely true. I think that the results speak for themselves. And certainly, I think that, at least for me and for many others that I speak to, the DA under the era of James Selfe was one where there was a lot that could be done in terms of collegiality, in terms of being able to disagree, but not have that be something that was the end of the world or something that required any other action rather than, an understanding that we were coming from different perspectives and how best to do that. I'm no longer in the party, so I can't speak fully as to what it is now, but certainly from after his chairmanship, from when I was in the party, I felt that that was no longer the case. But I don't think that this is the right thing to go into that at the moment. I think James will be remembered for being also one of the longest serving chairpersons, if not the longest serving chairperson of, at least from the DP to DA times. And so he had the time to also really get into that role and do it the way that it needed to be done. And I think it's part of his appeal as being the chairperson that he also allowed the space for different types of leaders to lead in the way that they could have. And that's what made the DA strong.
You end your tribute by sending your love to wife Sheila and his girls, whom the party owe a debt of gratitude for sharing him with for sharing James with the party. How well did you know him as a family man?
I don't think that anyone who knew James didn't know about his love of his family. And I mean, he was in party politics for 43 years, so that's almost his entire adult life. And so for him to have been able to navigate both the intensity of what was needed politically and still be such a well-balanced human being and such a good family man, I think, again, is just testament and something that a lot of us would look at and think was really great. Because that's not always the case in politics. I think you often see the opposite, where it becomes all-consuming and people often actually have a breakdown in most of their relationships outside of their political parties. So again, I think that speaks a huge magnitude about the kind of person that he was, but also just definitely, again, reiterating that sending love to Sheila and his girls, because being in a political party and particularly being in the DA from a party that was 1.7% in 1994 to where it grew to was really, really a lot of hard slog and long hours for everyone. And everyone in political parties knows how much you are away from your family. So for them to have allowed James to have given so much to the party as much as he did, I think they are really owed a huge gratitude, not just by the DA, but also by South Africa at large.
Mbali Ntuli, let me thank you for your time.